Welcome. You're watching The Big Question. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. Trump calls it big and beautiful, but for India, it might turn out to be costly and painful. I'm talking about Trump's one big, beautiful bill, which has sparked a political storm in the United States, but it could also have a ripple effect on the Indian diaspora, not just in the US, but also Indians here. It's a sweeping 1,116-page proposal which has narrowly passed in the US House of Representatives, but now faces a tough battle in the Senate. Among its many provisions that will directly hit Indians, the bill proposes a 3.5% tax on remittances sent abroad by non-US citizens, set to take effect in 2026. The move will hit H-1B visa holders and green card holders as well. For the Indian diaspora, this means that every dollar sent home will now come with an added cost, potentially straining the financial lifelines that support many, many families across our nation. This additional financial burden could lead to a reduction in the amount of money remitted, affecting families in India who rely on these funds for essential expenses. Now, why this matters to India? Well, the US is a major source of remittance for India. According to the RBI's March remittance survey, the US accounted for 28% of the $118 billion received in India between 2023 and 24 in remittances. That's roughly $32 billion. A new tax on these outflows could discourage formal transfers and strain financial support to families in India. According to research by GTRI, the proposed tax could reduce remittances by 10 to 15% and cause losses to the tune of $12 to $18 million annually in foreign currency inflows. There's also a larger macroeconomic picture at play. Remittances are also a crucial source of foreign exchange for India. A decline in remittances from the US could impact the country's dollar reserves and balance of payments. There's also a concern among certain Indian companies who have exposure to the US. For example, Trump's rollback of green incentives will impact companies in India, green energy companies like Wari Energy, who get 57% of their order book from the US. At the same time, automakers like Tata Motors may benefit on the back of US tax deductions tied to American assembled vehicles. Similarly, the IT sector could also stand to benefit due to the extension of corporate tax cuts. The big, beautiful bill also continues in line with Trump's crackdown on immigration, a move that will once again see ramifications for Indians, considering our 5 million immigration population in the US. So with all of this and trying to unpack all of the impact of the Trump big, beautiful bill is what we're doing today. What will be the impact on Indians in the US and what it means for them? To speak on this today, I'm joined by Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat, Ajay Bagga, market expert, and Arup Raha, chief economist, APAC Oxford Economics. Welcome to all of you. Let me start with your view, Arup, on the bill as it is. We know that the final version of what we see could be quite different from what is being proposed right now. Having said that, what is the impact of the bill? And let's start with its impact on the US economy, which will then, of course, have a ripple effect all across the world.
Yeah, hi Tamanna. Firstly, thanks very much for having me on your show again. And I'll start with a confession. I haven't read the 1,016 pages completely. So
I'd suspect a lot of the makers of the bill or those who have passed it in House of Representatives haven't read it either. Probably got the ChatGPT or Grok version of it.
I think you may be right. I've kept emphasizing something. The bill hasn't fully passed. It's obviously gone through Congress. Now it needs to go through the Senate. It hasn't passed. But what it has done is that it's creating a fair amount of uncertainty. And I think that's really the larger effect. I've talked about this before. It's not Trump's actions per se. It's the way he keeps changing his mind and doing things that will have the larger effect. But if you assume that this bill actually goes out in its current form, you're getting the effect that you've seen in the bond market. The long-term bond yield has gone up and it's staying stubbornly high. And it should have actually come down, given that growth is going to slow from here on. But the bond market is worried about what's going to happen on the fiscal side. And that's gone up. That's going to keep borrowing costs high. That's probably going to have a further effect on the negative effect on the US economy. you should have seen a fair, given the tariffs, you should have seen the dollar strengthening. You haven't seen that either. The dollar has stayed on the weaker side. So you're actually seeing results that go against economic theory, that go against past experience. And that's largely to do with two things. One is that the uncertainty that Trump has injected into the system. And the second thing is that there's actually a legitimate concern about US credit. I mean, don't tell me they're not going to default or anything of that sort, or they're going to go down, but there's been a downgrade, and there's a certain amount of worry about the long-term fiscal position in the US. So this is just a small part of what's playing out. In terms of its effect on India, I'd emphasize something. I think there's a fair amount of drama that's being made about it. It's just 3.5%. And the truth is that you can easily make that up by some element of depreciation of the rupee, which would anyway happen. You're talking about a 2-year period in which it's coming through, a little slightly weaker rupee, and you've made it up. I wouldn't worry too much about this damaging remittances to India. Firstly, remittances tend to be relatively inelastic. They are coming in for a certain purpose, to help family, etc., which is not going to be so much affected by a 3.5% tax. And in any case, the rupee probably depreciates over that period to make up for that difference. So as far as that part is concerned...
So the remittance bit is not something that's bothering you? You think that's not a big deal? What about their policies on immigration, on healthcare? Some of these things which could disproportionately impact immigrants, including them Indians?
For sure. But that's, I think, more of an impact on the US economy than it is for India. The Indians just go somewhere else if they really need to go, the immigrants. If they can't find it, they believe there's a better opportunity somewhere else. It's just that one part of the world, the better opportunities have slowed down. But the larger effect will be on the US economy, given that immigrants do certain kinds of work that the citizen may not be able to do or willing to do. So I think you have to be a bit, I think it's more self-defeating than anything else.
Self-defeating or not, it is something which is likely to get pushed through. And Ajay Bagga, this is the point we need to understand, that at the end of the day, the Republicans have the numbers. And yes, it is Republicans who are pushing back against the bill. Having said that, some version of this will come through. How do you look at the impact?
The bill will pass the Senate. They have the numbers. So 1 or 2 holdouts might be there. The Vice President has a casting vote. So at 53-47, the Republicans have the numbers. 1 or 2 of them will be holdouts, but still you will get a 51-47 with 2 abstentions at most. So nobody is going to take Trump on. He's shown that in the House also, where he actually warned the holdouts that you will be out of the party if you don't fall in line. So we are expecting this bill to pass. The bond markets have already not spoken, they are screaming with the higher yields that this is unsustainable, and you are adding to that. But this is all a structural story. It will take a long time to work out. Still 80% of global trade goes through the dollars. Europeans buy oil from the Arabs, but everything is built in dollars. So you have incongruencies like that built into the system. It won't come down immediately, might take 10 years or something for meaningful impact. But this bill is coming and we have to live with it. As far as the remittances go, it will have an impact on the poorer countries like the Central American nations, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, where these remittances from the US make up 20% of their annual GDP. For Mexico, it's 4%. For India, it is less than 1%, $32 billion. And we don't know how much of that 32 comes from citizens, how much comes from non-citizens. So even if, say, 75% is non-citizens, you're talking of a lesser number, and 3.5% on that. What it will lead to? A very high cost of compliance, because if you read the fine print, it's saying that even citizens will be charged this 3.5%, and they will have to claim a tax refund in their tax statement. So it's something like the TCI that we put on foreign remittances in India. Trump seems to have caught on the same idea. Will it dramatically impact our economy or our remittances? No. People will find other routes, informal routes, bitcoins. People will carry gold into India if needed, and you will find other mule kind of ways, some part. But again, we have to see the Indian diaspora in the US is largely professional.
Yeah.
It's not laborers like we have in, say, a Middle East is very different. We have more blue collar diaspora in the Middle East. The US Indian diaspora is largely second generation or more, and it's professional. So this 3.5 will not make much of an impact, Tamanna. Healthcare, I agree with you. There will be issues. US is trying, and if you look at the data put out by the US government, if they are paying $100 for a drug in the US, even a developed country like Japan probably pays $20. Most of Europe pays $30. So big pharma has been overcharging. In fact, Indian generic makers are a breakthrough for Trump if he encourages them to set up more plants within US. So not very clear on the impact on Indian drug makers, but yes, healthcare will be impacted, immigrants will be impacted. And one big reason behind this 3.5% is to identify the 11 million illegal immigrants who are estimated to be in the US. They want to track them down through these tax payments. So it's not only just the commercial part of it. It's like our TCI and all where 0.5%, 1% used to be charged, or our property transaction where 1% is getting charged to even the seller. And that helps the IT department to track them down.
If I look at it from the point of, so two ways of looking at it. One is, of course, if the bill increases fiscal deficit in the United States, strengthens the dollar, what happens to India from an economic purpose or perspective? One is from the Indian diaspora perspective. I think the other way to look at it also, and let me come to Mr. Prabhudayal on this, is for Indian students going into the United States more and more. We saw the to and fro on Harvard, for example. We don't know to what extent that's going to spread further, but there is now a sense that the Trump administration is not necessarily welcoming students from outside the country coming in, which includes Indian students who form a big bulk.
Yes, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. Tamanna, you're absolutely right that the policies of President Trump seem to indicate that his administration is not welcoming students from India. And that's so for a variety of reasons. First of all, there is a sort of feeling amongst his supporters that Indians are well qualified, they come to study, they do well, and they get some of the best placements, which the American citizens are deprived of. Now, of course, there is the counter view that Indian students who do well in their studies and are picked up, for instance, by high-tech companies, make significant contributions to the work which those companies do. In other words, they are not parasites, they are not burdens, but they are definite assets. Nonetheless, the policies which President Trump is adopting definitely seem to be a deterrent or a force which really pulls back Indian students from thinking of studying in the United States. As it is, Canada has become a pretty unwelcoming destination because of the tensions between Canada and India. And the United States is, well, not shaping up exactly in that direction, but there is a certain unwelcoming posture which is very evident. Now, the long-term solution, of course, is that we should strengthen our own educational base. It's a real pity that so many students have to go abroad. And why do they do that? Because of the fact that adequate placements in colleges of good standing are not available here. Very often, if you go to study in the US, you'll find that the academics who teach the students are Indians. So I don't know what we can do, but we have to somehow focus on the educational sector. And I must compliment you for...
I agree. That's one way of looking at it. But the fact is, a Harvard is a Harvard, a Stanford is a Stanford. I mean, those doors are closing. I mean, I don't know. This is moving beyond maybe economics and the bill. But Arup Raha, I'm going to get into this with you. The United States as a destination for talented Indians where their dreams will come true. The lights on that seem to be dimming one at a time.
I agree. It is dimming, but I don't think it's going to be a longer term story. I think it's a very short term. Part of what has made the US is probably the greatest economic story ever told, at least in the last century. You could debate whether China is catching up, but the US is the greatest economic story that's ever been told. And a large part of that story has come from immigrants. It has been very welcoming to immigrants. Immigrants have gone studied there. It's and done very well. It's also it's not that the US is good at certain things. It is, but it's also probably the best education system that exists in the world. It's not just the Harvards and Stanfords. You can go well below that. You can look at the top 50, 75 universities, and they'll be right up there with the best in the world. So if they actually start messing with that element, that they are not going to be attracting the best talent in the world to be able to come into their system and then be able to keep some of that best talent in the world to be able to work in the US, it's going to cause a lot of long-term damage to the United States. I really, and if you really look at the US success story, the way they have attracted immigrants has been a great part of that story. At the entrepreneurial level, you have a dream, come live it here. At the student level, if you have a passion for learning something, we have the best infrastructure, the best professors, etc., to be able to teach you. So I think it'll cost the US a long-term story if they change that. And I think the people there are too smart to allow that to happen. I really think that the problems you're seeing with immigration right now, the short-term story is not a long-term story. Let's see, there's a case going on with Harvard right now. Let's see how it goes. Harvard has stood up and decided to fight. Let's see how it goes. They've got a stay order. Let's see how the long term goes.
Yeah, that's of course a work in progress. From a markets and economy perspective, Mr. Bagga, and like you said right in the opening of your comments, the bill will pass. It might have a little bit of tinkering here and there, but it will pass. What are the implications that we're seeing of this kind of policy making from the US?
See, on a very broad brush, it is like the final decades of an empire which is unraveling. So it is the late stage in an empire which worked for the last 100 years, and now it's unraveling. Structural weaknesses have come in, and it's reaching unsustainable levels when you have to pay $1 trillion a year as interest outgo, or you're running a 6.4% fiscal deficit. We couldn't have run that kind of a deficit consistently and not got a downgrade in our ratings, or not being forced to pay a much higher rate for our borrowings. The dollar has, enjoyed an exorbitant privilege as the reserve currency of the world. There is nothing on the horizon which can take its place. Even if you see last week when the bill got passed, Swiss franc and yen went up, but immediately there was clamoring locally that our exporters and our economies are under threat if the dollar weakens too much. Will there be a Plaza Accord, kind of a accord that was done by Ronald Reagan in the 80s, where the dollar was depreciated against the major exporters, especially the yen? I don't think so, because that message is loud and clear for everybody that it will destroy their local economies. So we are at a point where we are really watching who will blink first. Trump's posturing is at 200, 300% of what outcome he wants, he desires. So, we'll have to go through a very rough patch in reaching the desirable outcome for Trump. I think 10% tariff on universally is what we will come down to, but it might take 2 to 3 months. He will cut some non-entitlement expenditure. Till now, he has not succeeded in it. He'll be forced into it. Maybe the US will have to look at some other issuances, some other form, like their, I don't know if you saw on the weekend, the SoftBank founder, he talked about a joint sovereign fund between Japan and US So you could raise money. The two countries could seed, say, 10% each, like our National Investment Fund of India. So you could seed 10%, rest you raise from the market, and you participate in the upside as well. So it's not an expense item on the balance sheet. With all hedge fund managers now running the Trump administration, something like that, Tamanna, could come through. So I am hopeful. It won't be a very bleak scenario. The world will go on, and we will do well as a top 5 economy. We will definitely participate in that.
Well, we're in the top 4 now. We're in the top 4 now as of today. So that's great. Just one quick follow-up, Mr. Bagga, from the markets perspective. Is this a factor that Indian markets are looking at closely? We saw some impact stock-wise on companies that make rooftop solar products, etc., in the US. But do you see any large impact?
Not so much. I think the 10% will come for India, no matter how much we think that we have a great relationship or something. Look at the UK example. So 10% is coming, we say 2% before the tariffs. That is a definitive yes. Can US products sell in India? They are just too costly. So if you see last week, the Chinese electric car makers, BYD cut its prices by 35%, and all of them are down 7 to 8% today. So the best cost producers in the world are not able to sell automobiles. Where will a US car come to India? We should open it up. Same way, how many people in India? Yes, there are enough rich people who will want a Harley Davidson parked in their garage. Let them go and buy it. Don't make that a no-go. Farm products will not open. Even Japan has a 700% tariff on its rice. Even though average age of Japanese today is 53, you don't have enough farm labor, but still the Japanese don't open their farm market to the US. That will be a sticky point. We should stick to that. So not a very big impact, Tamanna, is what I feel. It's more the Trump policy chaos, which is causing flows to go haywire and risk sentiment to go up and down, which is causing trouble for us also. Last week, if you saw those 10,000 crores or 8,000 crore outflows, that was more the Japanese yields going up, some of the very highly leveraged carry trade moving out, and secondly, university endowment. Some names came there as well, where universities are getting funding cuts from Trump. He's talking about bringing in income tax on them. Just like in India, education is run by non-profits and they're not taxable, nor are their endowments taxable. He's talking about taxing them. So some of that money also went out. We get enveloped in that flow, Tamanna. More it's sentimental than an actual impact on the ground. Yes, 18% of our exports are going to the US. It is an impact, but that is because despite all our issues, we have managed to reach that level. So it's a very hard-earned, very resilient sector, which is really fighting against the Chinese and the Mexicans and still succeeding. It won't go down without a fight.
Absolutely. Mr. Prabhu Dayal, just as we wrap up the impact of this big, beautiful bill, it's also pointing to, I mean, that's what he's calling it. It's also pointing to what Trump's outlook is going to be, which is inconsistently consistent. And I say that because in the last couple of days, we've seen this idea of a 50% tariff on European Union, then saying, okay, I'll push it to July 9th. A lot of statements on tariffs on India, suddenly saying, I don't want, I want to tax phones which are not made in the US, so if they're made in India or China. Is it pointing to the trouble that we're going to continue to have for the next 4 years?
Well, I think we are prepared to take on that trouble. You're absolutely right that the only thing consistent about Donald Trump is that he's inconsistent. And his policies reflect that. Now, a lot of these policies are aimed at bargaining. They're seen as bargaining tactics. He raises the tariffs, and then there are negotiations, and he brings them down, or he comes under pressure. But nonetheless, he has shown that he will remain unpredictable. No, we started off our discussion with this 3.5% tariff, and I didn't get to say a word. You know, I was consul general in New York for 4.5 years, and I met a lot of people who came in on the H-1 visas. to work, they had some hopes of getting the green cards, but many of them wouldn't. So they would remit the money that they earned, and that became the sort of buffer for them when they got back home. It gave them the sort of saving base to invest in properties and to have a comfortable life. In any case, many of them came without families, and they needed to send these remittances to support their families back home. Now, for all these people, this 3.5% is not a small amount. It is significant. It brings down their remittances quite considerably. And there is anger, there is anguish among them. I am in certain WhatsApp group where a lot of our diplomats are, including those who are serving there. They're in touch with these people, and there is a lot of concern. They want India to intervene, but I'm afraid India can't do anything because it is an internal law of the United States. And if they want to put a 3.5% tax, there's nothing we can do to stop it. Nonetheless, I wouldn't dismiss it as being trivial. It is certainly going to impact the savings and remittances of these H-1B visas holders. And incidentally, some of them don't know what to do because some of them have the hope of getting a green card and then staying on longer and eventually maybe even getting citizenship. But some have to come back. They don't get any extensions on the H-1 visas. They are not able to get green cards. So this 3.5% tax is going to impact them. There is a certain amount of unhappiness. And I wouldn't just take it away as something which is inconsequential.
Of course. Listen, if you have to pay a tax and remittances which you want before, it is going to pinch. Arup Raha, you wanted to come in.
You can depreciate the rupee a little bit, and that ends. I think if you think of it from an accounting perspective, yes, it makes a difference. But from an economic perspective, a 3.5% tax on remittances can be easily taken care of. The rupee has always depreciated by a certain amount versus the US dollar. Anyway, it's an empirical question. It's hard to answer over a TV. That thing. I wanted to bring one thing because I think you were announced to quote another famous American, Mark Twain, that I think reports of its demise are greatly exaggerated. It still has the best education system in the world. It still has infrastructure. It has quality institutions. I don't think 2.5 years or 3 years of Trump is going to end that easily. It's a much longer process. It still remains an absolute economic power. So I wouldn't quite declare it dead as yet.
Okay, so this story is yet to unfold. What this final bill looks like remains to be seen, but it's going to have an outsized impact on the US fiscal deficit, the dollar, by extension, a lot of global economies, perhaps even the Indian one. For now, thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the show. That's all the time we have on The Big Question today. For all of our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Tell us what you want to cover, what want us to cover on The Big Question. We're waiting to hear from you.